I think on my clock it's now 13:40 already, so I think we should begin. Thank you all for coming in today at this session called Turn Specs into High-Quality Apps. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far, and thank you for being here, trusting me to get you through all your dinner dips. So I hope to have like a fun, inspirational session right now with lots of energy, and I hope that everybody can leave with some takeaways about how to turn specifications into high-quality applications. So can I have a show of hands? Who over here is an application developer? Who has made apps for mobile phones? Okay, so that's 60, 70%, something like that. Impressive, very good. I hope this session will help you get those applications to another level, a better level. And also, for those that haven't yet been doing app development, lots of this session can be applied to web development or desktop development as well. So just pick a match, whatever suits your kind of dev kit, and let's see how it goes. So for today, I wanted to actually start with a story. I like stories, and every good story always starts with once upon a time. And the great thing about once upon a time is that stories that usually start with once upon a time, they end with, and they lived happily ever after. But let's see how this story goes. I want you to meet a guy called Steve. Steve loves cake. Steve is a regular guy, but that one thing that he really loves is something that he would like to share with the world. I think everybody loves cake, but Steve is really a cake lover. Every day he gets out of bed, he eats cake. And it doesn't matter what kind of cake, if it's Oreo or chocolate or anything, but there's one kind of cake that he really, really loves, and that's a red velvet cake. The one with the red cake and the shiny white outside, and he even has like a special recipe that he got from his grandmother, and he wants to share that kind of knowledge with the world. And with that idea, he went to his boss and he said, "Okay, I had this great idea. I want to build an app that can share the recipe of my grandmother, so everybody in the whole world can enjoy the delicious red velvet cake that I love so much." So his boss said, "Okay, let's do that." He believed in this idea, and he is becoming. He loves the red velvet cake. He has a certain vision of an application, and he knows what he wants. So when it's formed into a project, he's becoming the product owner. A product owner usually talks in forms of use cases. I'm pretty sure many of you have seen use cases before, and that's kind of the start of like a Scrum team where the product owner defines his wishes, his functionality that he wants inside of use cases. So that's Steve. Steve is putting together a team, and one of his team members is called Lisa. And Lisa can build anything if it's a mobile phone, for mobile. She builds for iOS, for Android, using Xamarin or whatever a native stack is available. She's a T-shaped developer, so it doesn't matter if she's only developing. She can do DevOps as well, but also a part of testing. And she's not alone. There are a couple of other developers in her team as well. But like I said, she's a developer. And developers usually write unit tests to make sure that the functionality they are creating in their software actually works and behaves as expected. So while the form of truth for the product owner are the use cases, the form of truth for the developer are unit testing. And the last person I would like you to meet is Craig. And Craig, serious guy, has glasses, gets up in the morning and really thinks about quality. And he's like a mobile test manager. It's a tester, a specific test guy and also has the role of Q&A, so quality assurance. Testers usually write their form of truth in test scenarios. So these three people, or actually a lot of developers as well, are actually trying to make the vision of Steve come to life and build that application for them. The story will continue during the session, but keep those people in mind. Can I see a couple of hands? Who recognizes these roles in teams they are part of as well? So that's quite a lot. So I think this isn't like a fully functional story, because you can reference those roles in your teams as well. So the agenda for today will be me talking about a little bit about the three amigos, talking about ATDD or specification by example, and how to automate that, transporting it to mobile, and eventually, when we got all that theory done, I'm doing some live coding and showing a demo on what you can do to make this actually work. So let's continue. Like I said, we had a couple of roles right now. We had the product owner, we had the developers, and we have Q&A. And like I said at the beginning, when I was telling the story, every kind of role has a different island, and they tend to speak in different kind of languages. The product owner usually writes down inside of use cases. Developers write in unit testing, and Q&A in test scenarios. And that's really hard, because why would they have different kind of languages while they're aiming for the same goal, which is realizing the vision of the product owner? So it's very important that these three kind of roles of people talk to each other and make sure that they're on the same page. That's something called the three amigos. Three friends making sure that the goal of the application is being realized. This is not my term, it's a term that has been around for like 5 or 6 years already, but it's really important to understand the differences in the rules and why they are important and why they make the three amigos. They need one common language of communication, as well as one common format of communication. So we need to get rid of unit testing, because like a product owner, usually a business guy, doesn't understand unit testing, as well as the test scenarios from the Q&A. So we need to have one common language that everybody can understand, so they can be on the same page, making sure that everybody knows what they're talking about. The language, or the files that we're using today, are so-called feature files. They are plain text files. They end with, they have an extension called feature. And the awesome thing about feature files is, since they are plain text files, you don't have those lengthy Word documents that everybody loses, maybe reads once if you're lucky, and everybody forgets about and doesn't maintain it, because these feature files can be imported inside of your Git repo as well. So just keeping everything of your source code together with your documentation really lives up to making the product awesome. Within those feature files, we define different scenarios. And scenarios are actually different kind of outcomes of the feature and how it can work. So for example, when I would say I have a feature where a user could log in, I would have a login feature file, and within that file I would have two different kind of scenarios, one where the login is successful and one where the login is not successful. It's really that simple. And the importance of this talk, one of the takeaways, is that just keep it very simple, so everybody will know and understand what we are talking about. Those feature files are actually described using a language called Gherkin. Gherkin is, yeah, you can eat it. It's part of, it's found on, it's also like a pickle. You can find it on hamburgers. But the most important thing is that we need to define Gherkin scenarios. And there are a couple of keywords that are really important when it comes to writing specifications inside of Gherkin. 3 words. The first one is a given. So a given step is actually the first step of your scenario, and it's a setup, like starting your scenario. So, for example, when we go back to the login scenario, given the user is on the login page, is a really simple step. The second one is when, and the when step is when something else happens, a certain trigger. So, for example, when the user enters the details and clicks the login button. That's the second step. Then it's the verify step. So something expected should happen. For example, the user is logged in correctly, or the user didn't log in correctly, and you have like a certain kind of output. So this is just normal English. There's no terminology when it comes to technology or anything. This can be written in just plain English words. But the fun part about when you translate this to the digital kind of thing is that Lisa, the developer, also wrote her unit test using the AAA syntax. And when you apply the AAA syntax to this, you'll see that they almost mean the same. So at the top, we have arrange, the middle is act, and the last one is assert. I know many of developers, when they write unit tests, they use AAA style. So it's like almost reaching out from the developer perspective to the product owner perspective, making arrange, act, and assert really a technical bit, and given, when, and then are just natural words. So what I wanted to do, or to give you an example of a Gherkin scenario, was something that I would like to call an acceptance-driven presentation. It's actually something that we do right here at NDC. I know a lot of you have probably visited other sessions as well. And at the end of the session, there's this big box with cards that you can insert and rate the session. So I wanted to take that concept and put that inside of a scenario. So given a session is presented, like this one, when the presentation is great, then the audience will evaluate the session with a green card. It's really that simple. It's really straightforward, but I'm pretty sure everybody in this room understands what this means. It isn't that hard. And the power of this is that when you would write this in a unit test, it will be hard to read for someone like a product owner. And developers don't like those lengthy Word documents with all kind of use cases and everything. But this is actually so simple and so powerful that everybody from those three amigos understand what it means. So what I can do now is simply copy and paste this test scenario 3 times. When the session is OK, and I would change it to a yellow card, and the last one, obviously, is a red card. Luckily, there's a little bit of optimization that we can do within Gherkin. Those are the Gherkin examples. And that allows me to have placeholders. Like this one, given a session is presented, when the presentation matches a certain level, then the audience will evaluate the session with a certain color. And beneath that, we have certain examples. And even though this is just plain ASCII art, let's call it that, everybody can read this. And the power of this one is that the three amigos will be able to discuss these examples. For example, when the three amigos are sitting together and talking, and the tester says, okay, what will happen when the level is like super duper crazy awesome? What will the color be? And then the product owner says, hey, we don't have that kind of level. Okay, that's good. So I don't have to write a test scenario or anything like that. So the developer also knows that these 3 cases is the only thing that we need to support. And it's that kind of conversation and writing it down in feature files and making all those examples available for everybody to read that makes it very, very, very powerful. It's really an awesome and easy way to get everybody on the same page, and talking is one of the most great ways to share information with each other. So what we have right now, when we go back to the story of our awesome red velvet cake developers, we have those 3 amigos sitting together, writing out all the features that we want, writing all kinds of scenarios. So we have the login feature, we have like add to a shopping cart feature, we have delete from shopping cart feature, all those kind of things that we want to see in the application with all kind of different scenarios within that. And this is actually already the first takeaway that I want you to know when you leave this room. Just document in one common language, this language, Gherkin. It will help you tremendously a lot already. Don't need to automate anything, but just writing down in feature files, because the communication within the team will help each other and improve the application. So next step would be testing and automating it. When people think about testing, they often think about quality, because they have like a certain standard that they want to meet, that the application actually does and works as it's supposed to be. And when thinking about testing, usually people think about the testing triangle from Mike Cohn, and there's like different levels of testing available. At the bottom, we see unit testing. And unit testing is like the lowest form of testing, usually the kind of test that developers write. I hope everybody in this room writes unit tests. Okay, I see a lot of shaking heads. That's good. That's good. So there's a lot of unit tests making sure that the functionality at the function level of the application works. Above that, we have service layer testing, also called integration testing. It's more like end-to-end testing of a service. And on the top, we have the UI layer. That's the true end-to-end testing. So this Gherkin works especially well on the UI and service layer. You can do Gherkin testing as well on the unit test layer, but since evolution has shown us, it's easier to stick to unit testing. But yeah, you can think about it just writing the Gherkin test and do it on the unit test layer as well. But especially the UI and service layer will be awesome to do the Gherkin testing. For today, I'll just focus on the UI layer and especially have a focus on mobile. But we can also do the UI layer on something else. Like I said before, web developers can also just write the Gherkin test for the UI layer as well. And like I said, don't forget your service layer. Don't make a testing triangle upside down. So a lot of UI testing and very low on unit testing. Make sure this is the testing triangle that you focus on. So for today, we need a couple of ingredients to make these tests work. So we have our input as the Gherkin files, and we have to do a couple of steps to make it work fully automated on the mobile phone. For that, we'll be using Visual Studio. I'm on my Mac, so I'll be using Visual Studio for Mac, but it works also on Visual Studio for Windows. I'll be using SpecFlow. SpecFlow is the test runner that uses that converts the it's like the glue layer between the tests in Gherkin together with the unit test in C#. I'll be using NUnit because it's on a Mac. Because we have a mobile phone, we need the source code or the APK. So source code when it's an IPA or for iOS, or the APK because you can just randomly get an APK from the App Store and start writing tests on that one. And the last part is that we are using a Xamarin UI test. It can be another one, but for this one, the power of this one is that I'll be able to use C# in order to click around on the several buttons. So one of the things that I briefly mentioned was that you can really download an APK from the Google App Store, or the Google Play Store, sorry, and just write tests on top of that one. So if you want to impress another company saying, hey, I wrote a couple of tests for you because your apps keep crashing or I see improvement, that's one of the ways that you can do it. And it's really fun because it's really their application and not some kind of hybrid application that you made. But it's a fun way. So, like I said, I'll be using SpecFlow. I'm going back to the presentation example. And what we're seeing over here is a couple of lines of C# code. And the C# has an attribute on top of it. And there we see the given step. So given a session is presented, it's kind of a regular expression. So SpecFlow knows that when he sees this line inside of your feature file, it can automate and do stuff. This is a setup step. And obviously, the same counts for the when and then steps. So these are actually the same lines that you could see within your feature file. And within that, we can automate all the steps that we need in order to make sure that everything is working correctly. But what about these examples? Because we saw the levels, they can change, they can modify. It was the little table with green and OK and yellow and meh and everything. It's really simple as well. Over here, we see the when step. When the presentation is something, it will be passed on as a parameter inside of your function. And with that, you can run a certain scenario a couple of times with all those different examples that you could see. So, and the same obviously counts for the verify step. Then the audience will evaluate with a certain color. So this is a lot of theory, I think. But the main thing that we should remember right now is that we have a Gherkin layer on top. It's a domain-specific language. It's something that the three amigos talk to each other. So it's a file with a given and when and then steps. And the main important part is that they sit together to write that file. The second layer would be writing step definitions. And the step definitions is actually the translation of the Gherkin file and automating it using something like SpecFlow. And the last part is using a test runner, making sure, and the test runner actually clicks around inside of your application, so you will be able to make sure that it works. Okay, so that's a lot of theory. Now let's see if we can get something up and running. Okay, I'll just close this one. So who over in this room knows about Xamarin and or is a Xamarin developer? Okay, that's quite a lot. That's quite a lot. So I can probably skip a couple of things, but for now I'll be using Xamarin Forms just to show you an example on how it works on Forms. And after that I'll be heading back to the Red Velvet application that the team has actually has made. So what I'll be doing right now is I'll be using Visual Studio for Mac. I'm gonna make a Forms application. I'll just press next. And I say, give it a name like Hello NDC. I think the screen is flickering. I don't need a mobile backend right now. I'll just put it on my desktop. There we go. And there's this checkbox on the bottom. It says App Center Test and add an automated UI test project. I'll just check it right now, so make sure that we know what's going on. So the first step that I'll be doing right now is making sure that the application works. And I'll show you the first bits of Xamarin UI test. So this is just the sample that Xamarin Forms makes. And I'll just run the sample. Small intermezzo right now. Okay. Let's see if this one works. So let's see. So I'm just building the Hello World application of Xamarin Forms. Let's see if it pops up. And when that is up, I'll show you how to work with Xamarin UI test. While it's building, I can directly show you the Xamarin UI test folder. So for those of you that know Xamarin, there's an Android and an iOS solution. But since I checked the box of I want some UI testing as well, this is what pops up. So I'll just put those next to each other. It is deploying to the device. I had it running already in the background, so that's why it's already up there. But what we'll see right over here is that we have certain kind of tests, and we have a couple of just some basic code, nothing special going on over here. Finally, there the emulator is running, installing the application on the device. So this will be fine. What we're seeing over here are a couple of test cases, and one of the test cases is an add new item. And it does a couple of stuff, but what you can see over here is that we still have the arrange, act, and assert methods. So that's something to keep in mind, because that's what we want to translate over to the Gherkin language. So this is just the Hello World application of Xamarin Forms, nothing too special. It has a navigation bar that you can scroll around on. But what we're going to do is use the REPL. The REPL is something it's a shorthand for read, evaluate, print loop, and it allows me to click on stuff using the command line. So what I'm going to do over here right now is I'm first going to stop this one, and I'm going to write down app.repl. it allows me to spin up a terminal inside of my unit tests. So I should build this one first, rebuild. And what I would expect right now is that I would have like a couple of tests. The first one, the add new item. And I know there's a REPL over here, but it is ignored right now, so it won't run. So just to make sure that it works, I just added it here as well. And the REPL is something that allows me to click around inside of my application. So I have this one. I can extract the Android one, and I can debug this one. And what you'll see right now is that the application will actually run inside of the emulator. And I'll be able to spin up the REPL, and I can just click around on side of the items inside of the emulator. And this is everything that this is everything to do with Xamarin UI test. So there we go. OK, I've hit my breakpoint, and when I hit continue, I would actually expect the REPL to pop up. And this is something that is right now inside of an emulator. And this emulator is actually attached, this is inside of a terminal, and the terminal is actually attached to the emulator. And what I can do now is that the app, I can access the app through the app variable. So I can do app dot, and there's a lot of functions that I can do to, for example, you can see here scroll to, or query or print. All those kind of methods I can execute inside of the application, and that allows me as a programmer to actually execute code inside of the app. And this has nothing to do with Xamarin specifics. You can, like I said, download an application from the App Store, but this also works when you have like a website. You can do like CSS pinpointing of certain buttons. You can also do like coordinate something, tap coordinates. So if you know coordinates, that's a bad thing though, but you can just tap certain coordinates within a screen in order to make your REPL work. So what I'm going to do right now is tap the add button that's on the right up hand, and I can do this with a lambda function, and I say app.marked. And marked is actually something that is really useful, especially when you're doing a lot of testing. Marked actually means that if there's a label that has an ID or a certain text, we can easily find that using marked, because it's visible on the screen. So I can just do this, and what will happen right now is it taps the element on the coordinates, and it presses the add button. Obviously, this can be done with everything else as well. So what I would check right now, when I enter something here, item name, or I can do that with the save button probably as well too. And now the item is saved, and it's on the bottom. So this allows me as a programmer, when doing when playing around with the REPL, to make sure that the application interacts with the tests. And if you are unable, or if you don't know how the UI tree looks like, you can do something like tree. And tree allows you to see everything that's currently on the screen that we can use to interact with during our tests. And the fun thing is that when we browse around, so I have a different kind of output right now, and I do tree again, you would see a total different tree, because obviously it's only giving me the visual elements that are currently on the screen. That's why you have those things that tells you to scroll to or animate to, because sometimes when you have like a long list and files are outside of the screen, so it's really important to make sure that everything is out there. I think I can do copy right now, copying history to the clipboard, and I can exit this one, and it goes back to my unit test, because that's the kind of that's where I was busy working on. I can just continue, let the test roll. But since I did the copy thing, I can just paste it over here, and over here I see what I initially searched for during my REPL session. And it's really useful, because now I can just use that kind of code to copy paste that inside of my application, or inside of my tests, and making sure that everything should be working properly. So what I've shown you right now is a Xamarin UI test, a really basic example, but that's the way for us as developers to have like a way to navigate through an application. Okay, so I'll just leave that one up and running. And what I'm going to show you now is actually the application that our heroes built for us. So over here we see another Android emulator with the Red Velvet application. It's the first application that the team has built according to the vision of Steve. He really loved it. It's a really simple application though. It's actually just a shopping list. The first version of the Red Velvet cake didn't even include the recipe because Steve was thinking, okay, they first need the ingredients before they can use the recipe. So here we see the sample that they made. It's a shopping list. It's a very simple shopping list with items on it, and it has like a green check mark when the item is already either in your shopping list or you have it at home. So what I can do right now is just press the add button. I can add something like get eggs from NDC. I can save that one, and you would see it on the bottom. It's very simple. I can also click on one of the items. I can say that I bought it, and when I save it, it would have like a green check mark on the end, and obviously I can delete an item as well. It isn't that spectacular, but for somebody like Steve, he was like, wow, this is the first application. He's really proud of his grandmother sharing the cake recipe that he loves so much. So I'll put that one to the side. We'll jump over to the source codes. Red Velvet. Yeah, don't save. For this one, I also used Xamarin Forms, but I cannot stress enough, this has nothing to do with Xamarin yet. It can work on everything. So I'm not going to dive into the Droid or in the Xamarin Forms code. I'm really going to dive inside of the test solution, because this is where the magic happens, actually. You saw a couple of steps already that I did when it comes to a Xamarin UI test, but over here we have a different kind of structure. We have something called features, which resides the feature files. We have a folder called screens that resides the different kind of screens and states of the application. And we have certain steps, and the steps are actually automation steps. And I'd like to slowly walk you through them to make sure that you understand what's going on over here. So over here, there are a couple of features that the three amigos actually created. And the first feature that they wanted to specify was add a shopping item. So over here, we see a feature file to add a shopping item to your list with some context. And given I have items in my shopping list, when I press the add button and I enter the name of the item, I press save, then I should see the item in my shopping list. So it would be added to the bottom. Like I said, this is so very simple, but it really helped the three amigos communicate what would happen with the application. Behind this, there's a so-called generated file, and this is SpecFlow magic. Or it's not that much magic, but at least you know there's a generated code behind this file. All kinds of stuff that's going on, but eventually, these are the lines that are really important, because this is the actual unit test that we'll be executing. You don't need to look at this file because obviously it's generated, but know that it's over there. So what would happen when I open up the unit tests? I've run this before, so it should. Let's see if I rebuild this one. Let's see what happens. There we go. So we have certain kind of features, and the first one is add a shopping item feature. And I can run this test, and let's see what happens. So if everything's working correctly, the build is successful. What I would expect to see right now is that from the unit test, the app will get removed from the device. It will get reinstalled, you saw that. It would pop up, and it will actually test the feature. So right now we have the new application. It would press the add button. I have my hands over here, so I'm not doing anything. It's going to add the red food coloring. It's going to press save. It's going to check if red food coloring is actually added to the new window and if everything has been done correctly. You would see on the left side, the add shopping item feature is green. And that's pretty awesome, right? I mean, we have some documentation. This is our documentation. It's the product owner that understands this documentation, but we can also automate it. And that's pretty awesome, if you ask me. One of the things that's behind this is that we now executed this feature, and we have certain kind of steps that makes this possible. And over here, I should enlarge this a little bit. There we go. Over here, we see some code, like I said before. These are the when and then steps. So when I press add, the app that I had in my REPL as well, it taps on the add shopping item button. It knows the application, so the Xamarin UI test knows that it has to add to the shopping item button when it sees the I press add functionality from your feature file. When I enter a given name, and that's the name that we saw, the red food coloring, and it does all kind of magic to do the insertion of the name inside of the application. And over here, we see a very, very common pattern. It's the assert. It's the then step. The assert actually helps us to make sure, like unit testing, make sure that the output is correct. There's one thing that I would like to point out here as well. Over here, let's take the easiest one. We do an app tap. And over here, we see that we are on a shopping list screen, and we add the add shopping item button. That's where the screens folder come in. We have two kinds of screens within this application. We have a shopping item. It's actually like a detail page. And we have a shopping item list. And what we're doing right now over here is something called the page object pattern. Because this, you can just write these specifications for either iOS and for Android. It doesn't matter because the functionality should be the same on both devices. But actually tapping on certain coordinates might be different because of the UI, because of how it looks. You might have like the tab bar on top on Android and have the bottom tab bar on iOS. But by abstracting it using something called the page object pattern, this can be done for us easily. So what I'm doing right now over here is that the iShopping list screen has a function. That's the add shopping item button. And behind this interface, there's an Android-specific version, because I'm using Android only, but you can also make an iOS-specific version as well, or maybe even a web version if you're making a web application. So what I can do right now is show you that the iShopping list screen has an Android-specific implementation. And here we see the marked functionality. So I marked the button with a plus sign. And this way, the application can just tap the add button, just the plus sign, and make sure that the item is being added to the list as well. So let's go back. This is the feature that I was talking about, but one of the other features is the mark as bought feature. Over here, we are using a scenario outline, so it's different kind of examples. And at the bottom, we see kind of examples that some are stated as bought, while other are stated as not bought. So it's the green check mark or not. And when I run this one, I'll just run this one and go back to the emulator. It's going to do for each row inside of that example file, it's going to execute the test again and again with different kind of parameters, making sure that everything that has been written down within the feature file actually works. So what I'm going to do now is search for the plain flower, mark it as bought, save it, and check if the green check mark is over there. And if that's correct, it just continues with all the other tests as well. So what we're seeing right now here, that some are slowly turning green. The last one, the icing sugar, actually I made a mistake on purpose just to make sure, just to show you that it actually works. So what it's going to do right now is check the icing sugar the other way around. So this one should be not bought, but since it's wrong, it's going to be red at the outcome. But as you can understand, the three amigos who actually made this feature file just wrote down the specifications, and we're going to automate it. So it's going to do the icing sugar now. It's going to flip the toggle to not bought, but because of the example that is inside of the feature file, it's gonna be red because it's a wrong one. As you can imagine, there will be a lot of feature files inside of this solution, but the most prominent part is that because it's inside of your solution, your documentation and your code will be always together, instead of like having a Git repo for all your code and some kind of other file system where you could write down the use cases, and they tend to go out of sync. But with this way of working, it doesn't go out of sync, and that's pretty powerful. So let's go back to some slides right now. So right now what we have is like a couple of feature files that has been written up front. The developer built the application and automated it, and that's pretty awesome. So we have now documented or living documentation inside of a mobile phone, and that's when the team actually started believing and loving the application. So the first version that we just saw was version 0.1 beta, and quickly after that we had 0.2 beta and so forth and so forth, until finally there was enough functionality inside of this red velvet application to make it a 1.0 version, and that's the version that actually got released to the app stores. Everybody was happy. It was Steve that has made his vision come to life, and he was able to share the recipe from his grandmother with the world. Sadly, 1 week later, when he was checking out the app stores, the red velvet application, what he so much believed in, only received 2 stars. Oh, that's such a pity. He had so much energy inside of that application, and he wanted to make sure that everybody would get the recipe, but luckily, the reviewers told us why they left such a bad review, or a low rating. So there's Tim. He loved the ID. He wanted to give it 5 stars, but the app keeps crashing. He gave it 1 star until the bug were fixed. Catherine said the app is super slow, was really looking forward to baking some cake, but it doesn't work. Angela also says it's crashing, but Jonathan, he just doesn't like the design. Okay, I understand that. It isn't the most beautiful UI out there. But the thing is that what the team was doing was either using the emulator, just like I did, or using a test device to make sure that everything works. Forgetting one really, really important thing, and that is that, especially when it comes to Android, but iOS these days as well, there are a lot of users having different kind of devices, and the application actually renders and works differently on all those devices. So even though the team had like best high-end devices out there, maybe Catherine or Tim have different devices, older and slower devices where the app doesn't work. So what the team could do is buy all the Android devices that are currently out there. That's going to cost them a lot, because there's really a lot of, there are like thousands of different kind of Android versions together with hardware versions that you can mix and match. But luckily for the team, there was a service called App Center. It used to be called Xamarin Test Cloud. It's being rebranded, or it is rebranded as App Center, but it allows you to do the mobile app testing inside of the cloud. And even though it's called a cloud, it's actually physical devices running somewhere in the world where they bought all those devices for you. So you don't have to do that again. So for that, I'm going to do another demo. I'll just switch to my browser. Over here, I have my version of App Center already open. And at the bottom, we see the red velvet application for Android. And when I click that one, we can do a lot of stuff inside of App Center. We can also continuously build and integrate and test and distribute to the app stores, everything to App Center. That's going to take me like another hour, so I'll just focus on the testing part. What we can do is, on the left side, there's a test button, and we can make device sets. I'm just going to press device sets. And what I can do over here is configure certain device sets with devices that I would like to use to execute my tests on. So I can just press new device set, give it a name like NDC Oslo. Now it's going to be fun because conference Wi-Fi can be quirky. Actually, NDC Oslo has a pretty decent Wi-Fi, but let's hope it works. don't see it working right now. Yeah, you can here also just filter devices on any form or phones or tablets. I don't think this is going to work because I don't see. I'll just refresh, check. Maybe it's App Center. One final try. Otherwise, you have to trust me that when you see this device list, it's like loads and loads of devices that you can choose from, ranging from like really old Android versions, Android devices. Oh, there we have it. So it's a really, really, really long list of all kind of devices. And this is only Android because I specifically targeted my device for Android. But this also counts for iOS and for certain kind of tablets. So what I can do right now is make a device set like NDC and search for certain kind of devices like the Samsung devices. Let's take the S9, that's a nice one. Let's add a Pixel device as well. And yeah, there's just a lot of devices like a Huawei, LGA, Edge, everything. I should click that. Okay. So what it's doing right now is that I have like a certain device set. They all have the same, or the Android 8 version. There's differences as well. But the power right now is that you can also select older Android versions and older Android devices. And you can play around with this. And what I'm going to do right now is actually execute those tests that I was running locally inside of this cloud. And I can do that using the App Center CLI. I got that locally installed already. And for that, I need to do some terminal magic. It's not that hard. What I'm going to do is change to my local GitHub where the Red Velvet is residing. And I'm going to pass along some commands to the App Center CLI. Where we're gonna, the most important thing about this one is, other than that I'm sending the APK and my tests and everything, is this line of code. Let's go. Oh. No. What you'll see over on the left is Marco K/top. Top is the name that I gave to a specific test set. But I can change that to the name that I have. So I created a new test set over here called NDC. And when I execute this command, it will actually upload my APK together with all the test files and everything that's in there. And it will execute all those tests within Test Cloud. Now it's going to be funky because I don't know how fast the Wi-Fi is going to be. It's going to upload right now. And it's starting test run already. So it's over here you see the Google Pixel device, the Huawei that I selected, and the Samsung Galaxy. Right now, what will happen is when I go to test runs within Test Cloud, I would expect to see, I'm currently on a trial, it doesn't really matter because you can just execute them. Over here, we see that the test is running. So your test reports will appear here when ready, and because it's 3 devices, yes, I have a question?
Yeah, is it possible to change when you send the APK? Can you point to a website and try that on the different mobile devices, like URL?
Like a GitHub account or something?
No, point to an existing web app site.
Yeah. The question was if you can also point to existing websites to do the same kind of test, probably. Yeah, you can actually perfectly do that. It doesn't matter. You can just execute the test inside of the cloud. But right now, what we're seeing right now here is that it's running on one device. 2 are waiting right now, and it's just running on the background. This will take a while, obviously, but you can integrate it inside of your command center or in your CD as well. So whenever you build at night, you can kick off the App Center as well. So it's black, and we're back. So I'll just keep this on running. Luckily, at the last night at 10 p.m., I already selected a different test set. And what we can see right now over here is that the same test that we saw running locally actually have the same test result. The mark as bought still has the icing sugar that's being read because I didn't fix that. But the add and delete are actually working fine. And what's pretty awesome about this is that I can click on one of those items. And over here, I see the different tests, the steps that are defined, the given, when, and then steps, and how it looks like on all those devices. So you get real-time information back from the test cloud, making sure that it actually works on all those devices. And what's even more awesome is that when you click on one of those devices, you can also see how much of the hardware was being used. So especially when targeting older devices, you would see slower performance, memory usage going high, everything that can influence your application. And you can even get a detailed log, crash in native code, test logs, and device logs. You can really see every logging that's going on inside of that physical device running your test, and that will help you make even better tests. So when we have to start, we have the feature files, we automate those and test those in the clouds, making sure that your functionality that you described works everywhere on all the devices, and that's pretty awesome. Okay, the tests are running in the background. Hopefully they'll be done when I'm done with this presentation. I still have 10 minutes left, so we'll see how it goes. Like I said, this is awesome. You have the functionality that you wanted inside of your specifications, and you automated it all the way to the back. So a couple of key takeaways that I want you to remind when you're leaving this room. Have 3 Amigo sessions. Like I started at the start of the session, already talking in the same language helps a lot, especially when they have different kind of viewpoints. The developer has a certain kind of viewpoint, the product owner, as well as the quality assurance or the test manager. When you put those 3 people inside of the room talking together, that will substantially help to make a quality application and making sure that everybody is on the same page. The second one, document those in feature files. Obviously, you need to document in some kind of form, making sure that everybody knows what we're talking about. Do it inside of feature files. It's a very common language, just given when and then and plain English. Everybody understands that. Next level would be automating that. I've shown it here today using mobile, but like I said, you can also do it for HTML website as well. And that makes sure that the application that you're building and your documentation is always living together. It's also called living documentation for a reason. You actually make sure that you can you automate your documentation. And the last part, which I didn't actually fully talked about, is use relish, pickles, or Gherkin to read the documentation that you have. One of the things is that even though the feature files are actually pretty readable, they're still plain text. And some people don't like plain text, especially the product owner can understand and read it, and he can just join the session, but he's probably not the one writing the feature file. Relish, pickles, or Gherkin make it actually way more user-friendly to read the feature files. So on the right side, I'm displaying something called from Gherkin, and you see the given, when, and then steps together with all the examples that are inside of the Gherkin file. But they have nice features like it's very readable because it's just HTML. They have collapsible examples, especially when your example set is really, really big. Something like collapsing can really help. So just pick one of them, publish your feature files to either one, and it makes it pretty awesome, and everybody can read those files as well. So, like I said, my story started happily. They had a very big turning point when the app got low ratings. But right now, the app has 5 ratings. Everybody is happy. Steve is pretty happy that he can share his recipe, and they lived happily ever after. The thing is that this is not fiction. It's pretty awesome, actually. You can use it everywhere inside of your projects. My name is Marco Kuiper. You can follow me on Twitter on @MarkFolio. I work at a company called InfoSupport, and this is how we make sure that our apps have the highest form of quality out there. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time. Remember my specification or my presentation by acceptation example, and you can find all the samples that I did on my GitHub page. Thank you. Oh, yeah, I can check if the tests are finished. That's a good one. I don't think so, actually. Let's see. No, it's still running. Still running. Too bad. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Mike. Great job.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.